Welcome to our course, Projects in Electron by Eduonix. I'd like to go over what we're going to be creating in this module. So this is going to be our Pomodoro clock, where we have a 25-minute counter that just counts down and allows you to remain focused on some task. And then you can do two kind of breaks. You can do a 10-minute break, you can do a 5-minute break. So when you click and you go into a break, in this clock, you basically pause your main timer, and then you come back and you resume your break ends, and you can go back where you left off on your main time. There's a set of stages we're going to go through as we construct this. So we have the stages of design, and we're going to start off with, first is going to be scaffolding. So what we do here is create the basic components of an Electron application. So these are components that any Electron application will need. You have things like the package JSON that tells the app what are the dependencies. We also have in there the command to start up the application and a little additional metadata that actually comes from the npm init that you do on your folder. We have also the startup file that's a JavaScript file, which the package JSON points to, and we're going to call that the bootstrap.js file. So in here, we create our window. We include our Electron dependency. We create the sizing for the window. We also tell the application where our view is. So speaking of view, we're going to have an index.html, and it's going to associate to a controller called index.js, just to keep the naming conventions very easy and make the app easy to read for someone that may be coming into it new. So in this view, this is where we're going to have, it's an HTML file. We're going to have our clocks that can be dynamically generated, they can be closed out. So there's going to be some dynamic code inside the HTML file that we're going to deal with to handle some of that ability. Then in the controller on the back end, we're going to have a little bit more JavaScript going on. So it's all just JavaScript there, but we'll have things like start the timer, stop it, reset it, and resume. We're going to have our breaks are going to be in there. There's some state retention we're going to have to manage as well. So we're going to want to know when we're going into a break, what's going on with our main timer. When a break finishes, it should display a message. When a timer finishes, it should display a message. All of that is going to mainly be handled by the controller. So let's go ahead and start creating our Pomodoro clock. Our first application is going to be the Pomodoro clock. And I am going to model it after the tomato timer, which is a Pomodoro clock. And this is at tomato-timer.com. So basically with the Pomodoro clock, you have 25 minutes that you just focus on some kind of task. So it's extreme focused time that you're not disrupted or anything like that. This clock here, you can do different kinds of breaks. So if you get down to 10 minutes left and you say, I need a break, this is pretty intense, you can go ahead and do one of these. So if I start the clock, then the timer starts kicking down. We're going to have an audible alarm and a pop-up whenever the timer reaches 0, just so you'll know that the timer has finished. So this can be stopped here, reset. And so if I start it again, it's clicking down. I want to go to short break. The Pomodoro timer is going to keep going, and we're going to go into a short break for 5 minutes. And then I can go back to the clock over here, and you can see this is kicking down again now. So that break is done. All right, so you can see here that's reset. And if we go over here to long break, it just starts clicking down. And it's 10 minutes, and then at some point we say, okay, we're good. We can go back over here, and our clock is going. You can also, let's say at 24:45, I'll go ahead and stop this. I'll go to short break. Short break is counting down now. So let it go to the full 5 minutes, and then we come back over here. This is still reset. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this, reset this. And if I go to long break right now, it starts clicking off immediately as well. And so back over here, this timer is going to get going. If I go to short break, that's going to start clicking off. If I go back over here, the timer starts again at the 25. So that's basically how this is going to work. And we're going to build basically this interface here where we have the breaks that are integrated in with the timer. So let's go ahead and get into Visual Studio Code. I've already created my folder for this and start building out the application. All right, so I'm inside Visual Studio Code, and the only thing I have in here right now is an alarm. So this is going to be the audio we're going to use. So any kind of MP3 or .wav or whatever you want to use for the audio, you can find a lot of this on the internet, and just drop that into your main application folder. So I'm going to bring up the integrated terminal because I haven't done anything besides create the folder and drop this file in there. So we're going to have to definitely do an npm init, and I can do it right here. And you can see now I'm getting the various prompts. So what I can do, because I didn't do a -y, is just go ahead and hit enter, let it go ahead and put in the default values, and that's going to be fine. And yes. So that is complete. There's my package JSON. I want to go ahead and add in our start. That's going to be Electron space dot, I need a comma, because remember this is a dictionary. All right. So the first file I'm going to add is our Bootstrap, and I'm going to change this as well to Bootstrap, save, and add in Bootstrap.js. For this file, what I'm going to do is a little bit different. It's going to be a very short version of this Bootstrap. So we have the boilerplate code that we did with the hello world that you would likely want to use in basically any Electron app, but I just want to show you, if you want something really quick, this is another way. It's not really going to deviate from what we have in our other Bootstrap file. It's just going to be short, and it's not going to have quite as much functionality, but it will definitely do the job. Now, another thing we're going to need is Electron. So I want to do an npm install Electron. We're going to have --save-dev, just like we did before. And I'll let that go ahead and run, and then we'll get our modules once this completes. So there's the modules, and then it's going to take a few seconds here to finish off its initializations. All right, so that is done. Now inside of our Bootstrap, we're going to create that constant for Electron. So it's going to be the main component here, and we're going to have a require of Electron. We're going to create a few more constants. So we have our application, we're going to have a path URL, browser window, and a variable for the main window as well. So we'll do a const app, which is going to be electron.app, and that's just going to give us quick access to the namespace or the space inside of a Electron for electron.app. So we don't have to type that every time. And we're going to create a constant for our path. So we've seen this one before, and that's just going to pull from path. And then we'll do as well for URL, and that's going to be a require URL. And then down here we'll have browser window, and that's going to do or be electron dot browser window, and a variable for main window. Okay, so we can go ahead and create our app.on, which is going to listen for ready. And then in here we'll do our function and open brace. All right, so this is going to be the body of the main part of the application. We're going to create the window and add in the sizing that we want. So for our variable main window, we'll go ahead and do new browser window, and that is going to have a set of parameters it takes as a dictionary for width. So we'll do it 600, and height is going to be 1000. Then what we can do is for main window, we're going to do load URL, and this is going to be URL format, and we're going to pass in a parameter here as well. So I'm doing my braces on that, try and get this out of the way. All right, so we're going to have path name, and we've seen this before. This is the same kind of code we've already used in our hello world. And in here we're going to do __ dir name. This is allowing us to provide the root path and then whatever files we want to reference. So we have our startup file, and we're just going to call it index.html. You can call it pomodoro.html or anything else. Just be sure the name is referenced right here. Then we have protocol. Everything is going to be file. And finally, we'll do our slashes again as true. And that completes our Bootstrap file. So if we start up now, we're not going to see anything because there's no index.html. That would probably even throw an error. So what we're going to do is go ahead and add that. Once that's added, we have some code in it that we can actually see anything. Then we should be able to start our file. So it's going to be an index.html. And we're going to create a basic HTML page and then just start adding to it. And this is just 1T. All right, so we have HTML, and we can close that. And I'm going to add some styling to this. I'm going to start off with adding it right here inside of the HTML file. And some of you are probably cringing at that because we would want to put this in a style sheet file. We will, and I am going to show how to do that. It's just another association to a file outside of the HTML file, like we did in our Hello World app with the index.js. But we just use regular syntax in this case, linking it up. So we will do that once this file is complete. So we're going to have a container with a border radius that's going to be 20 px. And we'll have a width of 400. And once this here is finished, we're going to go ahead and stop this lesson, and then we're going to pick up in the next lesson continuing to build out this index.html. So we are going to do our margin of 20 px with an auto and padding. This is actually going to be semicolon. And then we'll have 20 px here. And we're going to do our text align. And I'm going to do another one of these for clock, but I'm not going to sit here and type them all out because it's going to be just basic CSS. So there's no reason to sit through all of that. So here is going to be for clock. All right, so I'm just going to paste in some CSS similar to this. All right, so there is the code we're going to use there. And that will complete our styling. And I'm just going to finish building out the top part of this. So we'll have our head section. And we're going to do our metas as well. So we have a char set that is going to equal to UTF-8. We can close that. We're going to have title. And let's just call it Pomodoro timer or clock. I guess clock is more appropriate. And we want to close this so we can close over here. And we're going to close off our head tag, and then we can start with the body tag. And this is going to set us up really nice to continue right in here, completing this HTML file. We left off in our view inside of index.html. Creating this styling up here. What we're going to do now is work on building out the main part of the page. And this is going to have our clocks, our drop downs with how many clocks do we want. It's going to have our break buttons in it as well, start and stop and reset. And once we have the view in place, we can actually just go ahead and see, make sure the application starts okay. So I'm going to create an ID for this div here of combo and then close off that div. And in here, we'll just put some instructions. So please select the number of clocks from the drop down that you want to use and click submit. Let's just say, and then click submit. All right, so now we need to create our combo. So it's going to be for the drop downs, there's going to be a select name number of clocks. Change that like that. And we're going to have an ID that's going to be clocks. All right, we can close this and start adding our options. So we're going to have 10 of these, and I'm going to do some copy and pasting here. It's going to be a 1. And just go down with the remainder. So we'll have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Just change these up. 1, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then over here, we'll just work our way. Actually, I'm going to start from here. It's a little bit easier. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Save. All right, so that completes the combos. I'm going to do a couple of line breaks here. And we're going to now start with some of our buttons that we're going to need. I'm going to do an input on this for the submission. So we're going to have an align equals center. Type is button. And we're going to say value equals submit. So what you can see here is really a lot of just HTML and JavaScript, and that's basically all you're dealing with. And then you just need to know how to get a Electron application, the components, how does the architecture work? And you can see how it works here. So after you initialize, you get package.json. You need to make sure package.json knows, okay, what file does it start up with, which in our case is Bootstrap. Then Bootstrap wants to know, okay, which is the first view? And it's index.html, and so you make sure that reference is good in there. Other than that, you're really just doing a lot of what you were used to in regards to web development. Okay, so we're going to now add a div, call this container, and it's going to be for our audio. So we'll do class is container. Close that, and we'll reference the audio now. So we'll have an audio ID equals audio. This is really only one, so it doesn't really matter what the name is. We'll do alarm.wave. And because we're in the same folder, we can not worry about path issues or anything like that. So just direct name reference is fine, and close that off. Then inside of this div, let's see, I think that is all we're going to need there. And now we're going to create another div. This is going to be another clock. So we're going to have a clock here that you can add a clock. So we'll have a button to allow the user to click and add another clock. And let's see here, we want to do an ID equals another clock. And do a quote. We'll do an align center. For some of this, I'm just going to paste in where we're going to have some basic HTML because you are already familiar with how to do that. So we're not doing anything in particular with that. Some of it, when we get down to where the code's a little bit more dynamic and we're concatenating strings, I'll go through some of what's happening there and try to do explanations of various components. I want to hit the different areas that you would want to have explanations for, but where you're familiar with things, I don't want to kind of waste your time just kind of typing code that's very basic and doesn't have much to do with actual learning of Electron. But there are some areas I'll just go ahead and type out the code so you can see that there's nothing special going on in those. All right, so we're at another clock. We're doing align center. Do a little bit of styling here, which is going to be for our top. We'll have a px of 10. And we also want to do a hidden equals true. Close this. So we'll have a button here. And the ID is going to be, let's say, button add clock. And then in here we'll do a type is going to be button. And on click, we're going to have add clock. And close. Add another clock and do button. Okay, so we want to close this div. There we go. And we're going to add a reference to our JavaScript file, which is not here yet, but it will be soon. Or actually, once we create this view, it will. So we're going to have index.js and close this. We don't have index.js. We can go ahead and create it. So index.js. And we don't need it open or anything right now, so I'll just close that. I'm going to close these other files we don't need, so close the welcome, the bootstrap, and this is where we're going to get into a little bit more of the dynamic code, and I'm going to do some inline JavaScripting here, although we are going to make use of the index.js where we're going to have our code. So for this right here, just do a type is going to be text JavaScript. And inside of the index.js is where we're going to reference the functions that we have. So like add clock and those other kinds of functions. And this right here is getting caught by the editor. Notice the blue underline because I've misspelled it. So that is helpful. And now we're going to go ahead with creating the different kind of clocks and the different buttons. So we're going to have timers going off. That's why we're doing this code the way we're about to do it, which is going to let it be a little bit dynamic. It's kind of like an inline function here. So in this function is where we're going to start calling some of that code. What I want to do, let's see here, we have our select. I'm going to go ahead and close off script here for this one, because what it looks like is our select got caught up, and we can go ahead and put it back where it was. Let's see, that's this one here, and add that there. Save. And actually, I'm going to move everything over a little bit just for alignment. Let's see if I can get this to act right. There we go. So I'm doing a command with the left brace to get all of this moved over. Okay, so this function here, again, this is where we're going to have timers counting down, and the ticks are going to be, we're going to get them from the index.js. But I'm going to start on this, and then we're going to come back into it. So we want this to be hidden, combo equals hidden true for our combo box. So depending on what is happening, once we get a little bit into this, you'll see how these pieces start coming together. I'm going to create element for a div, and another clock here we're going to do hidden. So it just depends on how they're making use of the clocks as to what is being shown and what's getting hidden. And this is not going to be a quote. So the user is about to select clocks. So we're going to do total clocks. They want to select how many Pomodoro clocks that they want. And for that, we're going to have a loop to handle their creation. So you can see the hints I'm getting here, which is really nice on this part. And here what I'm going to do is just clocks and value. And our loop is going to be I equals 1. Then we're going to have I less than or equal to total clock. Actually, we want clocks with an S. So I'll just change this here. And then we're going to increment I++ and just create a body for this. And we'll pick up on this starting in the next lesson. So the user will go ahead and put in how many clocks that they want. And this will go ahead and start spinning up the display of those various Pomodoro clocks. And that's what we're going to start creating next. We left off on our loop where we're wanting to go ahead and create the clocks that we are going to be adding. So these are going to be dynamically created. And I'm going to go ahead now and start filling in the content we're going to use inside of this loop. So we're going to create a few variables here. We're going to have an append string equals null. Some of these are just to help us keep track of what we've added. And also some variables are going to add content with each iteration. So these are kind of helping us do that. Now for this one, we're going to go ahead and add content by getting a document element, or creating one, sorry. So it's going to be create element. We want this one, and this is going to create a div. We're going to set our ID to 1 or to I. And in here is where we're going to get into the HTML mixed in with the IDs of clocks and the timers displaying. So the first part of this is to take our append string, and we are going to set its content. So basically the inner HTML, because we're going to have text, we're going to have HTML going in here. So that's going to look like this with a div, and we'll ID this with clock. And we're going to append so we can keep track of these clocks. They're going to get their own IDs, and you can see we're using the iterator to help us with that. So it's going to be an ID, and we want a plus, and close single quote, close the quote. Then we're going to have a class equals clock. And I've got a quote off here somewhere. So let's see here. I've got my ID. This one right here is the problematic one. So this is going to be a single because this quote here is ending with this quote over here. We're going to have a single quote in here to handle
the plus where we drop in our ID and single quote there. And then over here, let's see, this single quote is going to go out quite a ways. So this should be okay for now. So on our second line, I'm just going to push this back. We're going to have a div ID equals message. So we're starting with a full quote there. And then underscore, I'm going to do a single quote. We're going to drop in once again an ID and single quote in with my double quote. Then we'll close that div off so we can start a new div here. It's going to be div ID equals timer. So double quote on that one. Then we'll underscore, have a single quote. We'll drop in an ID. And then we're going to do a single quote, double quote, and close. And this right here, these underscores, these squiggly lines with the red going on, mainly because I've got a new line occurring. So I'm going to put this back up here like that. So basically I'm just creating this one line, and that's going to help with the syntax and also not break my string. So then I'm going to continue on. So we have now our timer ID that we've dropped in. We're going to create a span that's going to have an ID equals minutes. And then here we're going to do an underscore with a single ID. We're going to do a plus ID. Plus, we want to go ahead and do our single quote with our double quote there, like that. And then what we're going to do is close this and do a 25 span. Close our span. And we're going to create another span. This is going to have an ID of middle. And we're going to do our underscore here to drop in an ID for it. So we'll have our single quote plus ID. Now, although this is kind of all on the same line, but it's wrapping, it's a little bit more difficult to read. It is following a similar pattern, which makes it a little bit easier to understand and hopefully catch any kind of issues that might be occurring. So we always have the single quotes when we're dropping in our ID with the pluses here. All right, so I want to go ahead and close this off, and I have my quote there, my double quote, and I'll close off the span and do a colon. Then I'll close the span tag. And now I'm going to do another span for our seconds, where we're going to have double zeros to display. So we'll do a span ID is going to equal, and again, just that same pattern here. We'll have our double quote, whatever the variable is for the ID with an underscore, and then our ID, so we can mark it as unique. And go ahead with our plus, we have our single quote, double quote, and we can remove that quote there. Okay, so in here, we're just going to have zeros, and then we'll do our span closing tag, close our div that we started up above. So this right here is just going to continue to follow the same pattern. So what I'm going to do is paste in some other code so it's not going to take so long to type it out, and then I'll kind of go through it. Okay, so here I'm going to paste in this other code. So we have a few different functions that are going to actually, some of these are going to be coming from our index.js. And this right here, again, just basic JavaScript. We're doing some things with our on-click. Now, once you actually see the UI, this will come together a lot easier. But there's nothing really advanced that we're doing in here. Just have some buttons, then we attach to the on-click and call a particular function. And these, again, are from the tomato timer that we saw, where we had our start, stop, reset. We had our long break. We had a sharp break. So that's all of these different buttons coming into here. And all of that UI is getting built out there. So what we're going to do now, create a variable for a div. And then we're going to do a document.getElement. This is going to, by ID, and we're going to get this container. And we're going to also create a document. So we're going to create another div like we did above, because we're going to have a bunch more dynamic code coming in. So it's going to be an element, create element. That's going to create a div. And then our div, we're going to append child. We actually want div. Let's see if I get any hints, and I do. Oops, that's not what we want. So we're going to call it like this, and then we're going to drop in append string. Then we're going to init elements ID. Okay, so we create the HTML here, drop in our append string here to the container div that we have. And let's see, we have 2 closing braces, so that should close that part. Now what we want is one more function, so this will be the last of the more tedious type of code that we have to deal with. So it's going to be similar to what we did up here. This is going to actually add a clock. So I'm going to start with the first part of this where we create our variables, and then we start with our append string.enter HTML. Then I'll paste in the related code because it's going to be very much like we did above up here. And hopefully we'll be at a point we can actually see if we can take a look at our UI. So we're going to have another ID that we're going to use as an incrementer. We'll initialize append string. We're going to do an append string.enter HTML, and we're going to do our single quote there. Actually, this I am going to leave where I'm going to paste in the code because I don't want to have line breaks in it. So I'm going to get the code we're going to actually put into here. Okay, so this is our code that we are going to be dealing with down here. And again, this will be available to you to download so that you can go through it. But I don't think there's anything really to learn in regards to what's happening here. Again, it's just basic Java code where we're attaching these different functions to onClicks. So this add clock will create a new clock with the different layout or the layout for a clock. And each one is just going to repeat. So we're just adding these clocks and appending them. So there's a few different things we need to take care of down here. We're going to do another div, which is going to be a document.get element by ID, where we want to do container, and we'll have a document create element, and we're going to do div. And then we're going to close these off. So we have this div, so we're going to take that and then we're going to append again child, which is going to append string. That's not what we want. We want this. And then we can init elements with ID. Save that. And in our terminal, I'm just going to clear. And we can go ahead now and give this a start. Okay, so this is what we're expecting right now when we just choose the number of clocks that we want. We still have some code to work on to get this to go ahead and create them. There's a little bit of code in the index.js, but our UI is coming up. It's not breaking. To make sure of that, though, I actually want to go into our Bootstrap and add in the dev tools. So for the dev tools, we are going to add them right here. So still within our app.on function that we have here for ready, and I'm adding it before the last closing brace and parenthesis. And we're going to attach to main window. We want to do open dev tools save. And now we can check to see if there are going to be any kind of issues. So I'll go ahead and start. All right, so our dev tool is open. You can see we have one error up here and the console is open. So uncaught syntax, and this is on line 64 in our index.html. If we go over there, this is what we're looking at. And here's 64. You can see the line number for 65, which means we do have a line break in between. What I'm going to do is take that line break out like that. So now, again, it's just one large continuous string. I can tell that because there's no other line numbers over here in the gutter. And I'll save that. See, stop the application, go ahead and start it again, and let's see if we get any errors. And we don't. So this part is pretty good and ready to go. What we're going to do next is start building the back end part of this, basically the controller part of this, so that we can start having some of this functionality connect together, so between the controller and the view. And that's what we're going to get into with our next video. I've got our index.js open, and this is really the last place that we have code to implement. So there's going to be quite a bit of code here to implement, but where I can save us some time, that the code's not doing anything special and really only requires a quick explanation, I'll paste it in and we'll go through that explanation so that you
know what at least that code is doing. But again, if it's going to save us time, then I'm not going to worry about sitting here and typing all of it out. Okay, so what we want to do is create an array to hold the various dynamic clocks that can be created. So this is going to be called clock array, and we're just going to initialize new array. Now inside of our HTML file, let's see if we have the reference to, and we do, our index.js. So whatever we're putting back here should be available to our HTML page. All right, then we want to create a variable. This is going to be current running clock, and we'll just do a -1 on that. So what we're doing here is, initially we don't have a clock that is in the running mode, I guess you can call it. So we're just setting this to a -1, so it's not really a valid thing that's going on. All right, so our first function is going to be clock object. And I'll just create some parentheses here. We're going to have parameters for this. And this is basically what this function is saying. It's going to be the various functionalities, variables that we need for clock state. And so we're going to pass in big time. We're going to do whatever this mode is, animation, color, ID, all variables we're going to use in here. So the first thing we're going to do is this big time is going to be big time. We're just going to assign these to local versions, and we're going to have mode. And let's see, back here, don't actually need semicolons, so I'm just going to go this route. I don't think we actually use them in our Bootstrap. No. Okay, so what we're going to do also now is our animation, we're going to assign it. So animation, this dot color, and then we can go ahead with this dot ID. And there's some other variables we're going to use, so we're going to create those. We're going to have percent, mins, we're going to have sex, and count down ID. So we do need to keep track of that as the timer counts down. All right, so what we want to do is start assigning from the UI into some variables. So the time, we're going to pick it apart and assign it into some variables here in this clock object. So we're going to get those component parts. We're going to have minutes, and I don't want a J. We need to drop in the ID. And there's going to be 3, so we have seconds, we're going to have message, and we can just copy and make some small changes to create those. So this one is going to be seconds. This is going to be message. Message in singular. And start state, false in the beginning. And then we're going to deal with our break values. So we're going to have a 600. We're going to have sharp break val equals 300. So these right here are basically seconds. So let's see. So if I take 300 divided by 60, I get 5. So that's 5 minutes. And I'll just do this. You take 60 and divide it into 600, of course, you get 10 minutes. So that's how long our breaks are. And then we're going to do is started is false, another state variable. And then our message, this dot message ID, it's going to be message underscore plus ID. So that handles our clock object. So a few other variables we're going to need out here in the main area. Let's see, this is going to be test. We're just going to do a document get element by ID for a test. I'm going to do double quotes. And I'm going to create a function. So we had that function we kept calling init elements. This is it right here. Not that much to it. So what we're going to do is clock array. We're going to drop in an index based on ID, create a new clock object. So this is how these clocks are dynamically getting created. That 14.99 is basically going to create 25 minutes. So 14.99 seconds. And we're going to have some parameters going into this, which is the parameters up here. So that's what big time is being used for the seconds.
And then we just continue with the rest of our parameters. We'll have a fade to black. And we're just going to do a 0D 5B 85. I think this will show a color ID. No, this is not a hex. This actually needs to go into a string as well, and then our ID. And that is all we need. So just a one-liner there. So what we want to do now is create a counter function, which helps us on the back end. We're going to pass in clock ID. So I'm doing a capital I on that. So we're going to change the minutes and the seconds in the HTML. And for that, we're going to call our clock array. And we're going to do clock ID. That's going to be .mins math.floor. So this is how we're going to make the change. And in here, we want to pass in clock array. We want to pass in clock ID as the index.big time divided by 60. So just basically taking our overall time, which is being tracked in seconds, and breaking it into these component parts so we can get our displays right. All right, so we'll do this again, but this time we're going to reference seconds, which is SECS. So we'll just, in this case, call clock array, pass in clock ID, and .big time minus clock array. Clock ID is going to be .mins times 60. So that is how we're breaking the overall time into component parts. And this function keeps going, so we're not done here. And I'm just going to put a comment, break time into component parts of mins and seconds. So down here, we want to change the HTML to show the new minutes and seconds. And we're again dealing with our array, and we'll drop in our indexer. And that's going to be minutes. We need to call, this is going out to the view, so we need to call inner HTML, which is going to be clock array and clock ID dot mins less than 10 or just equals 0, else nothing, plus clock array. So these conditionals are helping us with our display so that we don't have odd looking UI coming through, so we can make sure everything's fairly clean. And then we're going to do clock, we have clock array, so we want to drop in our clock ID for mins. We're going to have something similar for seconds, so I'm going to copy this here, paste, and this is going to be seconds actually. This is going to be SEC, S, and same here, SECS. So this should help make sure that the UI looks clean. Then what we want to do next, let's see, I want to do a comment here. This is going to switch modes if timer ends. So we do need to account for that. And we're kind of up on our segment time here for this lesson. So what we're going to do is pick up on this piece, and that will finish off this counter method that we're building in.